Hello, I'm Greg Rowe with the Paranormal Study Center. I have with me Adrianna Larkin. She's an author, songwriter, and performer. She's also doing life coaching, and her topic today is going to be Igniting the Sacred Fire. I have the book here and the CD, all about reinventing yourself at any age. Adrianna?
At certain times, we've had experiences, hopefully, by the time you get to 50 years old, you've had some experience that's given you peace. You can recall what that feeling was by reliving that experience. And then by standing on the
field... You can ground yourself in that experience.
Exactly. And then by standing on the field of possibility, allow for it to show up as something completely unexpected, different than you could have ever imagined.
Don't you think that what you went through was a microcosm also what this whole generation of baby boomers are facing? We grew up in a world where parents had jobs, they had pension plans to look forward to, they had some sort of security, some sort of certainty that if you showed up, did a good job, your job wasn't going to be exported to Bangladesh and you would get to retire and your life would at some point be comfortable. And we're all having to learn to cope with, or most of us are, with living without comfort or having to find comfort in other ways. And when you speak of being centered in that experience, being in that place where you can remember what it is to feel whole, you're learning to do that in the middle of this swirling chaos of losing a business. And I remember where you wrote, and it really impressed me, like a few other passages in the book, about at the end of all of these losses, you looked around and you and Michael talked, your husband spoke to each other and said, we're actually rich. Speak to that a little bit, I think that's a wonderful insight.
Well, what I was gaining the acute awareness of is that we create our future. Time is illusory, as I believe, and a lot of metaphysicians believe. Scientists and religious experts are starting to understand time is an illusion. But our relationship with it in this 3D reality is what determines our ability to co-create or get stuck. I believe that we create our future in the present moments by giving thanks and acknowledging and retrieving all that was good from our past. It's the joining of future and past in the present moment that allows what we want to show up on that field of possibility.
A deliberate synthesis that we choose.
Yes. So our relationship with time is very, very important.
But at some point you decide, in the middle of all of this loss and everything's falling apart, that you're rich because you have family, friends, you have this web of connectedness and this web of supportiveness around you.
Well, all we have at any point in time are our present moments. I'm very aware that in some third world countries there are people without fresh water, without food. Many of them are getting by on the day-to-day. They are being sustained. Some are not, but some are. I think a lot of that ability to sustain ourselves, and my situation wasn't that. I had running water. I had food that I liked, and I had a person who was sharing a vision. And that was one of your
observations in the book, was that you were warm, you were sheltered, you were fed.
Right.
So I'm okay.
Exactly. And that is holding the space of love versus holding the space of fear. What will happen if? I'm okay now, but what happens tomorrow?
So what is your attitude? You're choosing to look at yourself as living in this space of love and saying, I am cared for, I have a place in this world, my place is guarded, there are positive people and situations around me, even though this or that has failed and this or that has fallen away from me. It is not all dross. And this is a choice of attitude that you choose to stand in that space.
It's a choice of personal power.
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice of personal power that we all can make to stand in love once we learn how not to be victims of fear.
So you're choosing not to buy into victimology. Refuse to be a victim. That's very powerful, Adrianna.
It's hugely powerful. And it's something that every one of us can do.
And you read somewhere else, I guess one of the other things that struck me was about resistance to change. How people have to, if they're going to undergo reinvention or choose to reinvent themselves toward a better, brighter future, they're going to have to allow that they're going to leave their comfort zone and live without comfort. But there's so much in our programming. you hear people mix comfort up with what is good and right and eternal, and they're really very different things. Like, well, I'm not comfortable with that, rather than that violates my sense of ethics, so I won't do it. And we need to make that distinction, don't we?
We absolutely do. We do have powers of discernment,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that I encourage people to cultivate with time. It's a little bit tricky in this 3D reality. Like you said, there's a lot of programming that takes place, especially for baby boomers. But here's what I found. Intuition is something that I believe we all have. I believe it can be developed. I believe we have it in small ways perhaps we don't recognize. When you go into a store and you purchase a book on a certain topic, why do you pick that book? When you go to purchase and say a dress for an event, why do you pick that dress other than it makes you feel good? But if you're feeling something, that is basically what intuition is. Intuition at any point in time is acknowledging how we feel. We repress a huge amount of feeling in this society. And it's that repression of feeling many times that halts our intuition. And this is how I tell people to distinguish between the voice of intuition and the voice of ego, because they can get really confusing. And I even reference that in the book. The voice of intuition, when we have acted on it, when we've been compliant with it, and we've done what it has requested of us, we're at peace. That nagging voice goes away. But the voice of ego...
Peace is one thing, and you keep mentioning it, and it's very true to have inner peace. What else does a person gain by following your steps toward reinvention?
Well, I want to address that question, but I want people to understand, because this is a key element in understanding the difference between intuition and ego, because I'm going to talk a little bit more tonight about some other things you can do there to be aware of that. But ego, and I had my ego show up when in the course of writing this book. I had this tiny little voice in my head that showed up as maybe a 2-year-old in a onesie dragging a blanket. You know, would get up in the middle of the night, wake me up and say, "What makes you think you can write a book? Who are you? You can't write a book, and if you got a book, how are you going to get it published?" You know, this is the voice of ego telling us what we can't do. Now, intuition will often guide us and tell us not to do that at a point in time, but then once we've acted on it, it will go away. Ego is very different. Ego will continue to nag you even after you have done what it has requested of you. When I would give in to ego and I would quit writing, it said, "See, I told you wasted all that time for nothing. Why didn't you just give it up? Why did you even try that? Who are you anyway to think you can do that?" That is the difference. And that's where the feeling comes in. We have to be aware at any point in time how we feel. Do we feel at peace or do we feel conflicted, even after we have completed what we're supposed to do?
And it sounds like that little voice, I don't even know if I would say that it was ego. I think I would tend to think that that was socialization. You know, the assumed self-restrictions that we get from others, the sense of not being worthwhile that maybe we've heard from parents, teachers, anyone else who has questioned your power, questioned your ability, and you internalize that after a while.
Right.
What I think Glasser would have called the looking glass, or Erickson, I'm sorry, would have called the looking glass self. You know, we can choose to reinvent and not be in that looking glass self. And maybe that's where the meditation ties in, becoming authentic within your own body, your own breath, your own space and time, and not responding as a social being to what others think you should be, this manufacturing of this persona that is to be marketed to the world. That's what's reacting. I think the authentic person doesn't do that. I mean, I may be wrong here, but I think the authentic person is not responding at that level. They don't have that nagging, repetitive tape going on, that loop.
Well, exactly.
Which is
They've
learned
done
behavior.
a process that I reference actually in the second book called repatterning by pattern interruption. You know, it's like the cosmic bicycle wheel that's turning and you throw a stick in it and it stops. Sometimes we think we need to replace an old pattern with a new pattern, when in reality, sometimes just stopping the pattern that you're in is enough.
And a new pattern will emerge as it needs to.
Exactly, without having to think about how that gets produced.
Right, because the pattern of our spiritual life is organic, as is the pattern of our physical life. So it's going to reemerge, a new shoot or branch in place of what needed to fall away.
Correct.
Yeah. But again, what do your readers, what do your listeners gain from, igniting the sacred fire, their own sacred fire, besides peace of mind and a sense of authenticity and maybe a little more resilience in life's storms?
I would like to think that they would get a sense of personal power and understanding their ability to manifest what it is that they've desired. And, I wrote this for people at the midlife stage, and I was amazed. One of my surprises was how many people in their 20s and their 30s saw themselves in this book from a diverse number of backgrounds. For a time, I had a young lady helping me with publicist who was a 30-year-old African-American new mom, and she was embarking on this new experience, and she said, I have to be honest with you, I did not expect to find myself in the pages of this book. And she says, I did. Every single word you said resonated with me. And we had very different lifestyles, very different backgrounds, and had the 22-year-old graphic artist who did the front cover actually ended up embedding the font so to make it print ready. And she said, I read your book, and I decided I have to reinvent myself. So I think what that tells me is that there are some universal themes that to a certain degree we are all just beginning to understand, and will be called upon more so in the shift that's forthcoming, to understand our personal power, to understand what we can co-create for our lives, to understand that in doing so, it is not a selfish act, but a completely selfless act, because it brings us to our inspired purpose and the service that we can offer, not only for ourselves, but our community and the world.
Well, that is beautifully stated, Adrianna. So as we anchor ourselves in a higher purpose in service to mankind and service to the planet and its upward evolution, automatically the details of our personal lives start to improve and to upwardly evolve.
Yes.
Because we've entrained ourselves into that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very well put. One of the things I think that struck me in going through all of this was that you were saying that it's easier for people to reinvent themselves. You were just mentioning 20 and 30 years old. Actually, at our age, in 50s and 60s, than it is then.
Right.
Why is that?
I tend to think it's because we have gone through some of the life staging where we don't have as many people dependent on us. By the time people reach 50 or 60, ideally, if they've had children, they're grown up, there's more commonality to have an empty nest going on. I guess in my darker moments I say, well, I'm closer to the end of my life than I am the beginning, so let's make the most of it. The reality of it is that we don't have as many things we have to acquire. What we have acquired, however, is comfort, and we're very well aware of what makes us comfortable. And sometimes that becomes a sticking point in beginning our own reinvention, the thought of beginning anew.
Okay, so we're less encumbered and therefore can change more readily.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate your coming here. Tonight, Adrianna will be speaking in front of our group and performing. She does wonderful guitar solos for our group. She's also part of a band which performs. And it kind of reminds me, as somebody who really liked some of the folk singers of the 60s and 70s, like Joan Baez, Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, Carole King, very much in that genre. Kind of folk music, Irish traditional music, also R&B. She can do all of these genres seamlessly, just moving from one to the other. And she'll be speaking about the process of igniting the sacred fire, how to reinvent yourself. We meet every Friday evening in Madison, Alabama, at the Radisson Hotel, every fourth Friday of the month. And this is our featured presenter this particular time in February 2011. I hope you enjoy, and I hope any of you who are seeing this online will consider picking up this book, this album. I think you'll really enjoy it and be glad that you did. Thanks again, Adrianna.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it greatly.